Hey everyone, and welcome to today's presentation. If you're new here, my name is Dr. Dan Khay, doctor of pharmacy, personal trainer, and nutrition coach, specializing in creating content with deciphering the food label and improving your metabolic health. Today we're doing something a little different. About a month ago, I had the amazing opportunity of being a guest speaker at the University of Miami, focusing on the American nutritional landscape, where I put together a presentation, and truthfully, I didn't want to leave you guys out of it. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. The lies, deception, and cover-up. And hopefully this presentation lives up to its title that didn't take me 3 days to come up with. But what better way is there to start a presentation than to talk about death? The American crisis, the silent foundation of mortality. And for this presentation, we'll really just focus on the top two, talking about the effects it's been having on our country. The first one, heart disease, taking the lives of 695,000 Americans in one singular year. Cancer, in second place, taking the lives of 605,000 Americans, again, in one singular year. If you do the math, that's 3 deaths every 2 minutes in the United States from cardiovascular disease, and that's 1 death every minute from cancer. And really let that hit home for a second, because once it comes into realization, you'll truly feel like the air was truly sucked out of this room. But that's a great thing, and I'll tell you why. Because that means you care and you're intrigued in where this presentation is going to go. But why do I show you these statistics? Well, let's see if you can answer that question for me. What is the connection between the majority of these leading causes of death? Well, if you have thoughts of the actual reason yet, let's make it a little bit easier. What's the connection between the 7 disease states I highlighted for you? Well, the answer is actually very simple. The connection is that these 7 disease states are actually symptoms and illnesses of a single main root cause, metabolic dysfunction, totaling over 2 million deaths with direct metabolic ties. Now, this is simply a snapshot of 2021, but what if we zoom out and see the reality of the situation? Now, between the years of 1970 and 2020, the story is no different than the year 2021. Thousands of Americans continue to fall to these disease states year after year, with several positive trends and almost every leading cause of death spanning the last 50 years. And you may say, oh, but Dr. Dan, this makes total sense. Larger population, higher amounts of geriatrics, more people are living longer. I mean, case closed, Watson. And truly, it's a valid point until you realize heart disease, for example, was proving to be equally, if not more fatal, when the population was only 250 million in 1970 versus 2020, where the population was 331 million, actually totaling a 61% increase in the population. So it may not actually see or bridge the gap there, but it does suggest that people are actually taking their health more seriously, or they have better options and access to therapeutic options. However, age wouldn't really be the main driving factor, in my opinion. You could say the same thing about smoking and alcohol. Both had stark decreases in total population utilization. However, total deaths remained stagnant or even grew. So, to really put this together, let's go back to the previous slide for a moment. When I say metabolic dysfunction, syndrome, disorder, or disease, what that really means is a speed bump or even a roadblock in the body's ability to process food into active energy. Specifically, a dysfunction down to the cellular level where our cells are starved of energy, yet our fat cells and storage continue to grow. And the hormone behind this metabolic cataclysm is insulin. Think about how many different effects insulin has. And usually if you ask that question to anybody just walking down the street, Either A, they don't know what that is, or B, oh, it's just lower sugar. But insulin is a lot more than that. But let's start with the basics. Insulin is an anabolic hormone produced by the beta cells in our incredible pancreas. It's truly extraordinary. In the liver, it controls gluconeogenesis, glycogenesis. It does de novo lipogenesis, which is making of fatty acids and cholesterol, aka store energy. In the muscles, it soaks up excess glucose. In the brain, energy and satiation. In our fat cells, it tells the fat to hold on to it and not let go. In the blood vessels, vasodilation, meaning lowering your blood pressure, or maybe even vice versa. In our kidneys, sodium and water retention. I mean, it does a lot. But unfortunately, due to our ever-growing resistance to it, we have a lot of it. And we can see that in the population with the increasing levels of disease states directly tied to hyperinsulinemia, which again is a very fancy term of chronically high levels of insulin. So looking at obesity, prediabetes, metabolic dysfunction, fatty liver disease, and of course, the one that we all know, type 2 diabetes. All of these conditions go hand in hand with one another because of insulin. You guessed it. Something is causing our insulin to be chronically elevated, leading to insulin resistance, leading to metabolic dysfunction, and leading us to become sicker. So the question is, what the heck caused this metabolic crisis? And the answer is right beneath our noses. Pandora's cereal box, hijacking America's food supply. So let's see what happened to our food over the course of the last 50 years. Well, between the years of 1970 and 2020, the first thing we've noticed is that the total calories consumed had a 25% total increase, meaning we're eating a surplus of 500 calories, which really comes down to eating an extra meal per day. And you can really see that here as you see the transition between 1970 to 2020, with that stark rise since the 80s, leading to that peak of over 500 excess calories. But the question is, where are these calories coming from? Well, the reality is it's coming from ultra-processed foods, specifically a 71% relative increase. Back in 1970, we're eating 35% of our total daily calories coming from ultra-processed foods. Nowadays, 60% of what we eat is ultra-processed. And we can see that translation on this graph, meaning at the amount of total daily calories we're consuming and the amount of calories coming from ultra-processed food. These two lines are literally doing the tango with one another. They're literally exact replicas. But I really want us to take it a little further. Let's focus on the years 1980 to the year 2000. This was a very pivotal time because right at this moment, we had the low-fat craze. So what does that mean? At this time, somebody was able to put their feet up on the table, take their cigar, and say, Watson, I figured it out. If people want to lose fat, we just need to decrease the amount of fat in our food. And that's what they did. They removed the fat, but they pumped it up with high fructose corn syrup and different types of sugars and refined grains. So lower fat, more of this other industrial sludge. So, question is, why would decreasing the amount of fat increase the amount of calories eaten? So while you think about that, let me give you some context. The reason I pose this question, because if you really take a look at the graph, at this time frame, fat was decreased. Fat is 9 calories per gram. It's the most densest macronutrient that we consume. So if we're removing calories from fat, everything had become fat-free, how come our calories for the day increased? Well, the answer is fat is crucial to our metabolic health. Think about that. Hormonal satiation and caloric regulation. What does that mean? When we eat fat, we trigger leptin. We trigger the GLP-1s that everyone is talking about, the L cells. It helps us feel fuller. When we feel fuller, we actually eat less. Well, there is the caloric regulation. But that's the opposite of what's been going on in that time frame. The other component is blood sugar stabilization. Fat is harder to digest, it takes longer to digest, and it actually slows down the digestion process, meaning sugars aren't broken down as fast as usually, meaning blood sugar is more stable, and insulin does not have to keep flying out of those beta cells and out of the pancreas like we talked about. Another component of fat is it helps us absorb essential nutrients. A, D, E, K. These are the three that are so important to our everyday lives, and two of which are on a national or international level we're deficient in. And the last one being its effect on our neurological pathways and cellular integrity. Guys, what are our cell walls made of? Fat. What are the myelin sheath on our nerves made of? 80 to 85% fat. It's super important. Yet we got rid of it. And because we got rid of it, we had to start eating more since those levels and those processes that we're so used to for all the years prior aren't working the way they were intended. Now, when we talk about ultra-processed foods, we can break those down into different sections. Seed and cooking oils, 270% increase. Industrial added sugars, including high fructose corn syrup. Again, I kid you not, 7,400% increase. Food additives, including emulsifiers, dyes, preservatives, 410% increase. These are components in our food supply that, if they existed, they were in such minuscule amounts. Now, all three of these topics deserve their own masterclass, and we're not going to cover them for the sake of this presentation and this video not being over 6 hours, but just keep that in the back of the mind. Our food went from food to frankenfood, and that's the problem. Now, let's see what else happened. Well, our total carbohydrate consumption had a 25% increase, meaning men were eating 67 grams of carbs more per day, and women were eating 62 grams of carbs extra per day. Now, think about this, because I really just want to pause for a moment because there's a lot to unpack here and explain why I'm talking about this in the first place. So, what is a carbohydrate? Now, there's many versions of carbohydrates, but if we really go down to the basic level, it's a storage of energy. And when that energy is broken down in our body, it becomes units of glucose, which is AKA energy for our body. So it's really important to remember this. Carbohydrates are sugars, and sugars spike our blood sugar. Now, with that being said, why would eating 60 grams of carbohydrates, AKA energy, AKA sugar, what would it do, or what's the effect it's going to have on our physiology over the course of all this time? Well, there's one word, there's one answer: insulin. In the presence of no exercise and no fiber, carbohydrates spike our blood sugar and therefore insulin. So make sure to really pay attention here, because what I just said is in the presence of no exercise. Why is this important? Well, exercise allows our muscles to soak up the sugars like we talked about earlier, remember? Another strategy in minimizing the effect of carbohydrates and minimizing the downstream effects on insulin is incorporating fiber. Now, fiber, the way fat is or does, slows down our digestion to make sure that glucose is to be processed slower, preventing those spikes that we're always trying to avoid. But putting exercise aside for a moment, if we know that fiber can help us mitigate these complications, how are we doing with fiber over the last 50 years? Wah, wah, wah. Not good. No bueno. Fiber has not changed. So we are eating the same amount of fiber since 1970 today, but we've had over 500 extra calories added to our days, over 67 grams of carbs added to our days. So you see where the discrepancy is. We didn't adjust the healthier biomarkers or the healthier aspects of the diet to compete with the unhealthy thing that we've been incorporating over the last 50 years. Now, if we put all of these changes together into a pot, for example, what type of soup are we going to end up with? A frickin' insulin paella, an insulin broccoli cheddar, baby. And this is what happened because this is the perfect breeding ground for metabolic dysfunction. We're going to stimulate your insulin levels high enough for a period of years, and you start to get the early warning signs of insulin resistance. But before I jump into the signs of that, just take a look at this graph. Everything that we just talked about since for the last 50 years has been contributing to this moment. Hyperinsulinemia, increasing our insulin levels, leading to insulin resistance, leading to metabolic dysfunction. But going back to the signs and early warning signs of insulin resistance, here are the hallmark symptoms of it. Intense cravings, frequent hunger, mood instability, postprandial fatigue, or just fatigue, just a fancy way of saying it after eating food, gaining weight, skin tags, and even darkening of the skin in any skin folds, like, for example, on your elbow, behind your neck, for example, between your thighs, different types of area where your skin actually turns black from the insulin resistance that's going on in your body. But what's truly horrible is that this becomes a vicious cycle. More ultra-processed foods, more insulin, more metabolic dysfunction, more desire for ultra-processed foods, and again, stimulate your insulin levels high enough and long enough, and you get sicker and deadlier. But not all hope is lost. That's what I'm here for. There are several core principles that we can incorporate into our daily lives to prevent our health from ever deteriorating to this level. So the question is, what can we do to not become a statistic on my PowerPoint? The remedy. First things first, calories are not the focal point. We cannot assume our body is only working on the topic of thermodynamics. We have to understand and choose endocrinology over thermodynamics. And the reason I say this is because of one clear fact. Ask yourself, how do they count calories? And I would actually challenge all of you to pause this video and type in, how is a calorie counted, or how does a bomb calorimeter work? And it truly fascinates me that people believe this bomb calorimeter, which is simply a furnace looking to measure the amount of energy released when you burn a food, is anywhere close to how our body that went over thousands and millions of years of evolution works. Come on, we have to be realistic. I mean, I don't want to say it's foolish, but it's truly disingenuous to say that calories is counted in a control system takes priority over hormones. I mean, that's bogus. But before I get any heated, let's go to the second remedy. Eliminate ultra-processed foods. And I put an asterisk by the word eliminate, which we will talk about shortly. But ultra-processed foods is hyper-palatable, chemically engineered food that truly has no place in our diet. If you are looking to incorporate it for whichever reason, and there are multiple reasons on why you do incorporate it, at least understand that you have to utilize different metabolic approaches to make sure you don't become, like I said, sicker, and you don't become a statistic on the graph. If you are to incorporate ultra-processed food, make sure to dress them up, incorporating both soluble and insoluble fiber. Now, if you ever look on the ingredients panel, certain foods have both, certain foods have one, certain supplements only have one. But according to the work of Dr. Robert Lustig, MD and endocrinologist, you need to have both incorporated in your diet to truly get the blood sugar spike prevention out of the food. So get both soluble and insoluble fiber. Not only that, think about this. You can incorporate more exercise. So there's different ways to approach this situation, but my recommendation, if possible, you want to start eating single ingredient whole foods. The more, the merrier. And I know sometimes on social media, you'll get an occasional person saying, hey, eating that in moderation is totally fine. That is something I never advocate for. And let me explain. During this presentation, I asked the class to explain to me what it means to them to eat in moderation. How many coffees would you say is to drink in moderation per week? For example, for me, moderation of coffee, I'm not even going to call it coffee because the things at Starbucks is just pure sugar bombs. But nonetheless, let's just say it's 5 per week. To another person, it's 1 per week. For another person, it's 2 per day. We don't know what moderation is because it's so highly subjective. So that's why when someone tells you, oh, eat it in moderation, don't listen to that person. Do your best in limiting it as much as possible and enjoying it on the occasional day. But when I say occasional, it's usually once a week up to once a month, because that's truly the time you need, the other 29 days, for example, in that month, to undo what the food supply had been doing to you for, like I said, since your existence or for the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Now, the next remedy is that we have to remember dietary fats are friend, not foe. It's an essential macronutrient that is needed for optimal health. Now, what type of fats should you be incorporating? You have those lovely monounsaturated fats, extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil. You have your omega-3 fatty acids. For example, a nice acronym, fish that have a high amount of it is SMASH. Sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. And if you're looking for more plant-based options, chia seeds and flax seeds. And number 4, protect the liver and feed the gut. One of my favorite quotes and truthfully treatment recommendations by the doctor, the endocrinologist I mentioned earlier. If what you are eating is not protecting your liver, meaning if it's high in those starches, high in carbohydrates, high in those sugars, and doesn't have those protective properties of fiber, protein, and fat, chances are you should be avoiding it. If it doesn't feed the gut, meaning it doesn't have any fiber, for example, chances are you shouldn't be eating it. So keep that in mind when you choose the next thing that you're eating for lunch, for you're eating for dinner, that you're eating for your snack at work. But the 5th one is truly the most important remedy of all of the ones I've shared so far. You have to be proactive. Start these changes tonight. Don't wait until an abnormal test result is found. Don't wait until a diagnosis is made, because at that point, it could already be too late. Prevent a life filled with doctor's appointments, lifelong medications, and feeling sick in your own skin. Change starts on your plate, and that change, if it didn't start already yesterday, it can start right now. With that being said, I thank all of you for joining me in this presentation, and I really hope there's a takeaway to be had here. Think about all of the different topics that we just covered. Think about how this can be incorporated into your life, and think about how you can share this with the people you love to start making those changes that you don't become the statistic that we've been talking about. Guys, my name is Dr. Dan Khay. I hope you enjoyed this presentation. And if you want more videos like this or more long form videos such as this, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you haven't subscribed already, what the heck are you waiting for? Crush that subscribe button and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks.